Hello, and welcome back to another MagicaVoxel video. In this one, we'll be examining MadMaraca's style in MagicaVoxel, and they'll hopefully come up with an alternative mimicking that sort of art style, like the one you see here in this render. Of course, like in every video, I will outline the steps taken from start to finish with great detail. So let's go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know, MadMaraca is a highly skilled digital artist specializing in large-scale MagicaVoxel scenes with high detail. We are going to take a look at some of her images and try and dissect what she uses to recreate some of these scenes. Full disclaimer, the technique I'm going to employ might not be exactly what she does, but in my opinion, it comes pretty close to the technique she uses, and it looks pretty realistic. So with that, let's go ahead and just click on an image here. And taking a look at this, you can clearly see there's a bunch of detail, especially in the little like undulations on the terrain. It's not just flat, it gives a sense of not only depth, but scale. There's also all these striations, you could say, in the in this building, as well as this kind of dig site. There's a bunch of markings on the walls that give it a large sense of scale. Let's click on another one. So to keep this in mind, we're going to click on something else like this one. You can see this is heavy on the vegetation, which makes it very realistic. There's also all these textures you could see on the walls. Again, in my opinion, I thought this was placed by hand, and maybe it is. I have no idea. I thought placing this by hand would just take forever, and it would be so time consuming. But this is the type of art style we're gonna go for when we recreate our scene. Let's take a look at one more. This is also a good example. Again, this is vegetation, I guess, on like a different planet. But again, there's all these textures on the walls and like striations, just lines going through. And there's actually a program which I believe MadMaraca uses, which we are going to use to recreate our scene. Last example we're going to look at is, I think, one of her recent ones. Again, there's a bunch of just huge textures going through, detailed models, textures in the walls. Again, keep note of these textures, and also keep note of the squares and boxes and stuff, because we are going to basically easily recreate these types of shapes using a program called JSPlacement. So let's go ahead and move to that. To keep this video from being too long, I will skip over the download, installation, and tutorial process on JSPlacement. If you would like to know more information on JSPlacement, just go ahead and check out my video I made on it. I'll leave a link in the video. But with that, I'm just going to jump straight into JSPlacement and get started. Okay, so once you've opened up JSPlacement, just go ahead and go over to these series of dots over here. Go to JSPlacement 2, select the crap pack, and you could adjust this to however you like, but for detail's sake, I would recommend keeping it at or above the default setting. I'm just going to increase it slightly, maybe to 175. And a big part in making this scene is that height maps are your friend. So we're going to go ahead and click Save Height. It's going to make you save the file. We're just going to put it in desktop. I'll make a new folder. I'll call it tutorial height maps, and we're going to save it in here. Open it, save it there. And we're actually going to recreate, maybe save 3 or 4 height maps. So we're going to hit generate again. Go ahead and save the height. Save it in here. So now that the height maps are saved, we can go ahead and go open our folder. And we're actually going to downsize all 4 of these height maps to a workable voxel file. Or, sorry, a workable image size so that when we import it via FileToVox, it won't be insanely massive. So we're going to go ahead and right click, go to edit with Paint 3D, and we're just going to change the scale down. So we can go over to canvas and change the width and height to 500. And if you lock the aspect ratio, it should resize the height, so you don't have to change that. Go ahead and save it. And do the same for the other 3. Okay, so we're now going to go ahead and create height maps based on the images we created in JSPlacement. I'll be using FileToVox Lazy GUI in conjunction with FileToVox. Again, I'm not going to go over the specifics on how to use FileToVox. I have a separate video on YouTube for that. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and find where my FileToVox file is saved. In my case, I saved it in my desktop under graphic artwork. I'm going to go ahead and select the file, which I saved in my desktop under tutorial height maps, and select the first one. Output path, I'm just going to leave it as is. It's going to print out on my desktop. For the height map value, I don't want to make it too large, so I'm just going to give it maybe 35. It's going to be 35 voxels tall, and we're just going to go ahead and hit convert. Let that run its thing. Once it's done, it'll be saved in the folder that you pulled the file from in the second step, so it'll be saved right here. And I'm just going to do this for the 3 remaining height maps. Right, once that's done, we're going to go ahead and click on our first MagicaVoxel file and expand it. And you can see we've created, we've given our height map height of 35 based on the height map created in JSPlacement. Because it is 500 by 500, if we select all and press U, it's gonna constrict the object to 256. For simplicity's sake, and because we're working with only 256 for this scene, I'm just going to go ahead and select all, combine it. And we're going to go ahead and get rid of all this jaggedness. So we're going to press on this right here, the crop, and drag this downwards till we have something that's less jagged. That should do. Just going to go ahead and move it towards the center. Save it. And we'll do the same for the other 3. Once we are done modifying the individual voxel files, we're going to go ahead and make a new folder. I'm just going to save it to desktop. Call it JSPlacement tutorial. I'm just going to call it this. You can call it whatever you like. Select all 4 of your voxel files by either selecting them individually or holding down Control and left clicking the ones you want to drag over, and just drag them to that folder. Find where you saved your where your voxel files are saved in MagicaVoxel. And I'm just going to drag this into here. Now that's saved in here, let's go ahead and open MagicaVoxel. And if I go over to the project tab, go out of my folder, you can see it's saved right here, JSPlacement tutorials. And if I left click on them, you can see I have access to all the height map data I need. Okay, so we're in MagicaVoxel now. we can go ahead and first start by pressing Tab on the keyboard, deleting the cube, going over to the star icon here for pattern, locate where you saved your 4 JSPlacement heightmaps, select the one you like and just press this plus button. It should drag the pattern sketch into MagicaVoxel, and we're going to drag 3 in. Drag the second one, and then drag the third one. Actually, let's just drag all 4 in. We might not use all 4, but we can probably take some texturing from one of the height maps. So I'm gonna move this one aside because it looks the least detailed. Put this one over here. I am going to use this one as my floor and these 2 as my walls, and then grab, actually I'll use these 2 as my walls, and then this will be any texturing I need later. So in the world editor view as I am now, you can go ahead and press 0 on the keyboard and it should flip it upright like this, and you can press G to make it center to the ground and just drag it to the floor like that. Move this one aside, and then move this one over as well, pressing 0 and then plus and minus keys to rotate it, G, and just orient this so that it forms sort of room. Then we have something like this. If we go over to render, you can see in some instances you can see it's cut off, but if we go to model, it's not cut off. In render, you want to go to the 3 bars here, type sparse, have sparse checked, and now it fully renders the whole thing. We're going to obviously change the color palette, so we're going to select palette 3. Now it's a dark gray default color. And now that's done, we're going to go ahead and add texturing on the flat surfaces, like here, here, all around the corners, or edges I mean, using this. So what I usually do is I'm going to duplicate this and then shorten this till we have something with detail. I press 5 to center my cursor, my camera over to the object, and drag this over. And put this in like so. Of course, you don't have to use this one. If you wanted to use the other one, just bring this over and get rid of whatever you don't like. Just bring it over. Alright, now that that's done, we can go ahead and fix any like the deformities. So like for instance, this is just all like one solid piece. Let's go ahead and go select that part, and in voxel mode, just get rid of some of this so that it doesn't look like a perfect rectangle. Okay, now that's done, I'm gonna go ahead and change this dark gray to something a lot more workable. So I'm just gonna hold Alt, left click one of the colors or one of the objects, and then you can select the color to you want whatever you want. Make it somewhat lighter. And we're gonna go ahead and mess with the lighting here. I'm gonna get rid of the ground. Go over to the gear icon in render settings and turn the ground to black. Sorry, turn the background on. And now the background's black, that's good. We go ahead and go to atmospheric scattering. Turn the intensity to like 125. Turn on sun and give it a radius of like 40. Ozone set to like 815. And then orient the angle of the sun to however you like. And then over in the matter section, you can mess with the exposure and vignette settings. I'm going to keep vignettes fairly low, and exposure, that's a good one. And I'm still thinking on what kind of theme I want to go for this. And the lighting really determines the theme. Right now, the light is just pure white, and it gives it a sort of sci-fi look. But if I want to add like vegetation, we would not be using the white. So we'd probably change it to something a lot more warmer. Probably something like this. And then once you have the color selected, go over to the sample settings, the 3 bars. Turn these all on. Basically turn everything on except for pixelated. Go ahead and hold Alt and left click one of the objects. Go over to matter, and go to metal. And we're going to make the walls be somewhat reflective, but not too reflective, of course. And now that that's done, you can go ahead and change this color to whatever you like. It's going to be somewhat green. Maybe more of an orange color. Yeah, I think this should be fine. Now we can go ahead and give it a light source. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and pick which side our light source is going to be. I want to pick this side right here. And we're just going to use the simple erase tool with the floor face mode selected. And just find a spot you want to create a light source. Of course, you can always just go to orthogonal view. Select this cube so that you're facing it flat on. Go to marquee select and just go ahead and put a box like that. Delete it. Put a light source like that. But I did that in the last scene, so I want to do something different. We'll just use the face mode and erase, and just select a spot when I erase and just erase it all the way through. We're then going to select a new color. I'm sorry, we're going to go ahead and select the color that we're using for the walls and just fill one in so that when we add the light source, it doesn't poke through on this side and make it look kind of weird. And then go up to a spot where you know you can save, where you want the light source to be saved, and just left click. Now you have that light source. Go back to get a better look by pressing 8 on your keyboard. Once we've placed our light source, go ahead and find a appropriate camera position that you would like to reference back to. Once you found it, you press 7 on the keyboard. And now if you were working back here and want to get an overall feel of the whole scene as a whole, you just press 8. It brings you this view. Now we can go to render. Alt left click the color right here. And it should select that color that you use for light source. Go over to the matter section, emit, and put the emission to maybe 48, power of 3. And then if bloom is not turned on, please turn it on. I'll actually give it an emission of 4. Sorry, power of 4. Keep emission the same. And this is very white. And if it were coming like in from the outside world, it would not be this white. So we're gonna go ahead and change the color to something a lot more natural. So we have something like this, and I think that looks good. You can play with the emission settings to however you like. So if I wanted to make it fully bright, you can do that if you want. I think I am going to increase the brightness to maybe 60. And mess with the sizing a little bit. Okay, I think that's good. We're going to go ahead and add additional light sources. Maybe some peeking through some of these holes. So I'm just going to do that right now. Now that we added the light sources in, I feel like it's now very bright. So I'm just gonna go ahead and select a new color and find all the light sources I added other than the primary one and change that color to my new color. Once I've selected all of the other light sources, I'm just gonna go ahead and give it an emission shader, but not as powerful, by a power of 2. And give it a different color other than this one. Or you can if you want. It's all up to you. In our case, I will give it the same color as, or relatively the same color as the one out here, but a lot less bright because there's a lot less light coming through. And I've noticed that this might be a little bit too bright. So maybe I can lower the specular value and decrease the IOR so that it's not reflecting off too much. And maybe this orange is a little bit too bright, so I can tone it down some more. Okay, I think that looks fine. We are now going to add a secondary light source other than this one. That's going to be coming from up top. So I'm just going to go ahead and press, go to the world tab. Press the plus icon, drag this all the way up, and make this like 256. Give it a new color palette, constrict it, and then press A on the keyboard to make sure it's not in the camera view. Press render, go over to emit. Now you should be changing this color up here. The secondary light source shouldn't be brighter than this one, so I'm gonna lower the emission on that and change the color. So now that we have that, I think that looks good. If you want to give it like a little bit more detail and give it like a Borderlands style look, I recommend turning on display edges. Now the edges pop out a little bit more, and if they pop out too much, in your opinion, you can obviously change it in the gear icon, Right now it's set to 0.2. If you want it thicker, you just increase the value. Now it's more Borderlandsy, but I want to decrease it and make it more subtle, so I'm just going to have it at maybe 0.1. Okay, so now we're going to move on to probably the next step, which is the vegetation. And this part is probably the most time consuming, but also most fun in my opinion. So let's go ahead and get to that. Okay, so now we're going to be adding vegetation to our scene. We are going to go ahead and go to the world view by pressing tab and selecting one of the sides here and dragging it out by holding shift on my keyboard, which will duplicate said selected material. Press tab to enter the model view. And we're just going to go ahead and paint selected regions on this model with our with a new color. This is this section just gonna be for vegetation, and I'm gonna give it a dull dark green color. And using the floor mode with paint selected, just select certain parts that you want to add vegetation. Don't cover the whole thing, because we're going to be adding our own assets to its vegetation later. After we've colored some of the regions with our green, we are going to go ahead and just put like a white, actually no, give it another green color, this time something a little bit lighter. And we're actually going to create a gradient, so we're going to select this green right here, holding down Control and Alt at the same time on your keyboard, left click drag to the other side, and it creates a gradient. Now if we left click and drag, you can select all of the colors on this row. Using region select, select the whole thing that we want to apply the gradient to, and press right click on your mouse, hit random, and now you can see it's all this checkered stuff, and we don't want to keep all this, so we're actually gonna using region select with all these settings selected, just start selecting colors that you want to delete. We're going to delete most of these here. So we're left with something like this. And now we're just going to go ahead and select all of the green, press Control and I, and it selects the inverse. I'm going to delete that. And then we can go ahead and move this back over to this wall, like so. If we go back to render view, we can see now we're starting to add vegetation on the wall, and actually it needs to go up by 1. Like that. And we'll do the same on this wall. Okay, now that that's done, we are going to go ahead and start adding our own assets of vegetation to populate the rest of the walls. So go back to model view, press this plus icon, drag this over, press 5 to zoom in on it, and we're going to extend this outwards and lower it. Fill the whole thing, do the same thing we did before, and start bleeding. I'm going to stay in orthogonal view, go to the top, and using the erase tool in voxel mode, using plus and minus to make my brush bigger or smaller, just start clearing away the rectangle until we have something that looks a little bit more natural. We create like the illusion of vines. Okay, and then I'm just gonna duplicate this again by going to the world view, holding down shift and dragging the arrow out, making this smaller, placing it over like that, bleeding the what we had previously, filling it in again, and doing the exact same process. And if I select both of these and press U, I can combine both of them. You can drag this over like so. And we can definitely utilize this by going over in model view, going over to the edit section and under scale, and reduce the size of it by changing the value here. If it's nothing here and you put a number, it changes everything on X and Y and Z. But if I wanted to change it, just say on Z, like the Z axis, I type Z and then type in a number, and it'll change the scale, but only on the Z axis. So I'm just gonna go ahead and keep doing this until I have until I move on to the next step, which is actually adding like bushes and stuff. So I'll get back to you guys in a bit. Alright, I am pretty happy with what I have so far. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and start adding like bushes and thicker vegetation to the walls. When I was doing the vegetation on the walls, you probably noticed, let's say I wanted to access this wall. It's kind of hard to do that. Or like, let's say I want to take the vegetation. It could be difficult to, because they're all overlapping, it's kind of difficult to see what exactly you're grabbing. So you're going to utilize these layers here. If you don't see these layers, it's this paintbrush section. And you're only going to access it if you press tab on the keyboard to enter the world view, or pressing this arrow icon on this corner. So in the world view, we're just going to put all the vegetation on, say, green, because green is vegetation. So we can just go ahead and select what we know for sure is vegetation. And let's say you're not entirely sure, like, oh, I selected this, it's not vegetation. If I drag this up, you can see it's grabbing basically almost everything but the that one I just want to select. So we can just press Ctrl Z to undo it, and then start over. And I'm actually not going to do that, and I'm just going to start putting it one by one. Okay, so now after you select all the vegetation and put it in a separate layer, if you want to, you can hide it by just pressing the colored circle. And we're actually going to put this entire square into a separate object as well. Just so when we make a new object, it's not going to overlap with our layer 0. So we're going to put this on layer 3. Okay, so now that we put both these on a layer, we can go ahead and start adding different types of vegetation to the walls other than just like moss. To save time, I'm going to be using vegetation I created earlier. I'm going to leave the link to the file on my Patreon, which you guys can check out. It will be free to download. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Control A, just hit Control C to copy, and go over to where I saved my asset, and Control V to paste, put it here. So actually, after going to the voxel file to grab the vegetation, I forgot to save my work on this tutorial, and the layers didn't save, so I had to redo that real fast, but it's fixed now. So after importing the assets from the vegetation pack over to the tutorial series, you can see they're given a color that we don't really like. We can check out what that color is just by holding Alt and left clicking on it. Obviously it's linked to it shows up on the palette, and we don't want it to be that. We want it to be like one of these. And I'm just going to give it a different color other than up here. We're just going to go into each individual one and just color it. And I'm going to give it a little bit more variation, so I'm going to select other ones and color them differently. And you can obviously change these colors once you put them in your scene. Okay, so with that, let's go. I'm just going to go ahead and like literally just drag and put these assets over parts I think will make it look cool. So I'm going to start time lapse starting now. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Like we did before with the vegetation, we're gonna have to basically get all of the added vegetation to the green layer that we saved it on. An easy trick to this is you just hide both layers so you have just this. We can just delete this now. Select all that, put it onto the green layer, which is this. Now you have all the added vegetation onto the existing vegetation layer. And with that, we can now move on to like adding some shallow water right here. Okay, so for adding the water, it's a fairly simple process. We're just to go back to model view, select the ground, drag it up by 1, or duplicate it by holding down shift and dragging the arrow up. Go ahead and go into model view, delete everything, create a new palette row for the water, and we're just gonna keep it gray for now. It's fine. Go ahead and fill the whole thing, and then we can change the color now to just get a reference on what we want. And we're gonna put this on a new layer. We'll put this on 4, blue for water, and just drag it to where it what you think looks good. And we're gonna put the order of the water layer on the last, so that we have everything else overlapping the water. Go into render now. We can alt left click the water and give it a glass shader, and select this middle icon. Make sure your transparency is nearly 100. You can mess with the IOR, which is reflectiveness, and roughness to however you like. Because this is almost still water, it's not going to be very rough, because right now you can see it's doesn't make sense for the water to be like this because it's not moving. So we keep it somewhat low, like say 10. And then you can mess with these values here to get your water to look however you'd like. The denser it is, the more depth the water will have. So if I put this to like 13, you see you can barely see that there's any water at all. I'm going to keep it at like 70, and then you can mess with the phase if you'd like to. The phase kind of changes like the fogginess level of it. So if you have it like all the way at the highest, it's probably like completely transparent. So we're going to keep it somewhere in between the middle. And then now you can start messing around with the settings here. Alright, once you're happy with that result, we're going to go ahead and actually bring this back up and give this a secondary color, one that's darker than the first one. Make it like halfway. Bring this back down to the ground. And for the second color, we're going to do the same thing, but change the values. Till we have something like this. I think this looks pretty good. We can now go ahead and give it some slight haze. So we're just gonna duplicate this, put this kind of just above the water level, all this haze, give it like a whitish color, give it a cloud shader, and probably give it scatter. And we're gonna put this on the last layer as well. Sorry, on the last, on the order right here, you put the last. And I mess with the density and phase settings. Alright, once that's done, we can add some finishing touches, which is just adding a little more vegetation around the sides here to make the water look a lot less stagnant. And we're going to move this cloud layer to maybe this layer, hide it. And we're just going to take these like vines and just horizontally place them over the water, like so. We're definitely going to reduce the distance the vines go to, however, like that much. We can go ahead and also add little ripple effects around the corners here. Just select a lighter color and using the voxel mode with maybe a voxel count of 3, we can just add some quick ripples along the walls so that it looks like the water's like pushing against the walls. So now we have something added like that. Let's go ahead and just select one color that we use for vegetation and just in voxel mode, just place like dots here and there, just so that it looks like there's like leaves falling on the water. Alright, so basically that's the whole process from start to finish. And technically I could call this piece done, but I feel like it's missing something that should be in the center. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add that right now. You don't have to copy this. This is just for whatever you want to put in here. Or you can just practice just creating something like this and adding stuff later. But technically the entire video is done. But I'm just going to go ahead and finish this up with a quick time lapse on putting something in the center here. that pretty much wraps up the content of this video. This is the final product after figuring out what I wanted for the center here. I eventually came up with this, and I think it turned out pretty nice. And honestly, this probably only took 2 hours and 30 minutes from start to finish. And with practice, you probably get that done faster. And I hope this video has helped. As always, we'll see you all in the next one.